We're moving on to the scherzo of the Schumann Piano Quintet. Starts with scales in both hands. Staccato, which requires addressing two issues. One is how do you play relatively quickly, non-legato, and how do you get out of a scale and onto a chord. And I've addressed that before, but here's a reminder. If you think of the scale as a continuum, articulation is a continuum between legato and staccato. You need to feel the choreography of the gesture first before you worry about the articulation. Then you spend less time on the notes. If you spend too much time trying to articulate at first, you run the risk that the sense of ease, the connection between the notes, is lost. Connect the dots, that sort of thing. That if you connect the dots with a ruler, it looks one way. If you connect the dots with a sense of line, with a recognition that it's representing something beyond just connecting the dots, but a feel for how those dots relate to one another in space and create a real picture. So in this case, the gestural language has to take precedence over the articulative language to begin with. And then the final element is, if you're playing a scale, you have to address the keyboard with a chord or an octave. The easiest thing by far is to let go, is to optimize the way you play the scale, and then optimize the way you play the chord. Oops. It would help to play A flat, A flat major. It also changes my fingering. So. No suggestion as to whether it's the left or the right hand that plays these individual scales. My assumption early on is I'm right-handed, and I'm going to try it with the right hand and see what happens. Well, it's pretty obvious from what he's written, Schumann that is, that he means to start with the left hand, because the right hand is asked to hold a dotted quarter, the left hand just a quarter. So in other words, the passage is due to be started with the left hand, no matter how you continue. The third one, he actually provides a division, but that's not relevant to me, because what I'm looking for is whatever division works for me. Experimenting. I rather like that one, which is 4-3-2 on the left hand, and then another left hand. Group of two. And then the rest. In the right hand. Of course, no choice when they're both together. So. That's what I'll do. 3 in the left hand twice. And then 4-note group in the right hand. Okay. Big chord on the top. Even more reason to let go of the scale and of the keyboard beforehand. In terms of practicing octaves, the easiest octaves are these kinds that mix black and white notes in nice proportion. Because you can have a small gesture that links whites to blacks and gives a sense of easy motion into the keyboard, and then gives you a chance to readdress the keyboard several times. It's important because the hands are not playing the same kind of note at the same time, not to insist on the same choreography for the hand. If you notice carefully, the hands are moving often in different directions. Not always differently, just differently enough so that the bleakness of their gestural difference has to be taken note of. The more automatic you are with the sense of ease about the speed of this, the more trustworthy it's going to be. So, if I were having trouble with this, I might go to the E flat. I still might think that it happens that the E flat and the B flat both are on beats. Nothing could be nicer than to have the larger inflection point be the same point where there's a rhythmic inflection. Here and here, and I'll probably end on thumb in my left hand, even though fifth would work, because it's stronger and because it sets up the lower F. Whoops. All right. So it's a D flat scale. I know it's a D flat scale, but I'm just writing D flat, just as a reminder that I don't have to read the music. In other words, I don't have to look for every note to determine what I'm doing. I've already filed away a sense that that particular chunk of music is a D flat scale. It's like a shorthand or a means of identifying something larger just with its label. Of course, I'm wrong. So I'm going to take out my trusty eraser. You'll notice I write with a pencil. Most pencil erasers are not very good. I have a very big eraser, which I like a lot. I have a number of these. And they help me to get rid of my mistakes. So there's a G natural here. So if it were a D flat scale, it would be a G flat. Sounds like an A flat major scale. What's distracting often for many people is that the beginning note may not be related to what the actual tonality of that scale is. You think B flat minor or D flat major, who knows? An E flat scale. A flat scale would have the fourth finger on the D flat, and it's important to have a comfortable fingering. The black note major scales are really delicious if you play them with good fingerings, because they put your long fingers often on the black notes very comfortably. Nice groups. on C. That's where the scale is. Actually works pretty well. I do not need to use the F major fingering here. F major fingering is built for the right hand anyway. It's not built to optimize how the left hand should feel. If most of us were playing F major just in terms of left hand comfort, we'd put our fourth fingers on the B flat as we do for all the other flat scales and start on third. The reason most of us don't do that is because of the coordination of the thumbs when you want a strong sense of that tonal center. You want to be able to get to it and coordinate your two hands. But when you're just looking for comfort, it's always okay to change the fingering in accordance with what your body says. In this case, I'm starting on a C, and it's perfectly easy to play a C major scale fingering. No big deal playing the second finger on the B flat. That's what you actually do in the standard left-hand scale fingering anyway. Just play it differently. So I'm going to start on 5, as my instincts indicate, anyway, and carry on. Now, again, this is a certain indication of tempo. We don't know, it says molto vivace, so we're going to play it relatively quickly and hopefully lightly at the same time. It's not going to be breakneck kind of speed the way you could play a legato scale, because we have all these repeated chords, which is at least a definer of what some of the limits are. As in most repeats, I will use a gesture that walks me along the key to avoid having to overcome my own inertia by going up and down over and over. Depending on how light it is, how fast it is, I might be able to muster up a measure worth of that on one gesture, maybe even 2. And then I don't want to have to try to slither my way from this B flat 7th chord to E flat. I want to let go. So I want to bounce out of the keyboard on the last one and reapproach. There's no big deal about trying to find linking fingers. I can shake with whatever fingering I find useful. For example, say I like to shake on 1 and 3. There's no reason I can't move my hand and shake on 1 and 3 each time. You do have to know that there are ties in the left hand, however. All right. It's not going to work for me anyway, any other than by putting my fourth finger on A flat, which is the standard E flat finger. Same as before. I may as well just make a mark to remind me where that hand divisions are that I like so much. At the top, I could go 3-2-1 and finish in the standard fashion on G in the left hand. Oh, but it turns. No, I still could do that. Because it would, but I'm going to be using 2 again. So something's going to repeat, some finger. By going to 2-1 at the top, I end up on thumb, which for my purposes right here gives me more of a, number one, a sense that I've concluded the ascent. In other words, my body tells me if I go to 1, I've run out of fingers, I'm at the end. Instead of having to tell myself, oh, I'm on 2, but I'm at the end. So there is an advantage of going 3, 2, and then 1 for the octave. There would be more of an advantage if it weren't a filled-in octave with 2 already involved. That kind of reduces the effectiveness of going 3, 2. So, just in my little noodly experiment, I feel more comfortable doing 2, 1. That's reason enough. You know, I can go into all kinds of explanation of why it works. It's that it works that's most significant. All right. So, luckily I'm perfectly happy with this 7th between the E flat and D flat in the left hand, playing 5-2. Because that really sets me up for the scale. For someone with a smaller hand, they might want to simply slide their thumb, which is fun too. Repeats for now. I'll play them later on. All right, we're into the first trio. As we've seen before, Schumann really likes, unlike a lot of composers, to, at least in this piece, to show beaming that represents his sense of grouping. So, these notes, this is the downbeat, this G flat. Then the crucis to the next downbeat is marked with a separated note. I want to make sure that I'm not misreading. He says 6/8 is being consistent. Yeah, so these are 8th notes. That linkage is both physically convenient and it's also demonstrating some of the musical intent. So it makes it really easier to note when the chord changes as well, because he's defined it graphically, which is really useful, where the eye and the body reinforce one another. So here, this started again a repeated note, and of course makes me suspicious. I look at my partner's parts. They don't do anything very different there. It's one of those things where I don't know the answer, but I will investigate and see what other editions have to say. It sounds fine either way. It's such a small adjustment that I need to, for my own purposes, try to determine why Schumann would have made that one distinction rather than just repeating exactly. So the first one, I'm going to compare them. This is what's different. It's the only note that's different. The third one has the B flat again. Now I'm convinced. The fourth one has the C flat again. So it's showing intent, in other words. I'm going to erase my circle. Or maybe I will circle it with a different kind of intent. When I'm circling something because I make a mistake or something, that's one thing. I just want to notice it. When I circle something because I'm going to look into it further, I'll usually use a question mark or in some other way indicate that I want to research what's going on. So second time around. So it's basically 4 phrases exactly the same except for that C flat. Every antecedent, every consequent phrase, every second answering phrase has the C flat. Every first phrase has the B flat. And then we're done. more comfortable there. And if I go to fourth, it's not a bad thing. We just each of us have preferences, and that's mine, to go to the longer, stronger fourth finger. Not that I probably wouldn't do it ultimately, but just a small reminder, I want to go to second finger. There is no harm, no shame in writing more rather than less, so long as you can read it. I do have that liability. I often write things that I can't read afterwards, so I have to be careful about fingerings, particularly, that they're big enough and bold enough and clear enough, that they're useful to me. And again, sneaky hymn, flat, changing to back to the C flat. All right. Okay, so repeated notes, faster repeated notes. I rarely play repeated notes unless they're slow and expressive without changing fingering. It's just so deliciously fun. Then I have to find out how to get out of the repeated note. In other words, where do I want to be when I'm done? I know I want to be on thumb in the right hand, on C. Fourth finger in my left hand on A flat, again because it's so form-fitting for that four-note group, which would imply maybe I want to actually be on the second finger on C. Let's see how that could work out. If I'm on second on C, then my last repeated B flat would be a third finger. Sure. I have a certain prejudice in favor of going to strong beats or repeated note endings on my thumb. It drives my hand into the keys. The general principle I use is, first of all, a recognition that when you play a repeated note with changing fingers, going from longer fingers to the short thumb, in the case of the right hand, it moves you rightward and inward. So if you think of your arm moving rightward and inward, and also a little bit upward, it makes it very easy to play repeated notes very quickly. But I'm almost always thinking, rather than, I'm almost always thinking going to the thumb if I can, and so on. So in this case, if I can go to the thumb on the beat, so 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, sorry, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, whoops, 1, 3, 2, 1. So then I might do 2 4-note groups in the left hand instead of playing on 2. And the other thing is, by being able to go to thumb in both hands, that's really a delicious advantage. So I write 2, 1 for both of them, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, and then left hand is the only non-intuitive thing that has to turn to fourth finger to use up the 4 notes until the natural 4-note group happens. So 2, 1, 3, 2. And again, although I could, in time, when I ingrain, do this hand division I decided on, I could do it automatically. Right now I'm not in automatic mode. I need a reminder that I've made a decision that I like this division that starts on right hand thumb on D. You'll notice, in spite of the fact that I've done it 3 times, this is my 3rd time doing this passage. It's not yet automatic enough. So I just show my division. It makes it so much easier. Right. Again, my tempo is relatively arbitrary. I just want to be playing fast enough to know it's not going to be a big deal. Sorry Schumann, sorry you, sorry me. Whoops. There's that A flat scale again. So I need to remind myself of the 4th finger. Take this and compare it exactly with the preceding passage that sounds exactly alike to make sure that it's exactly alike. But at this point, it's just as easy for me to make sure that the fingerings I choose here and the gestures I use and the groupings I choose work. If they work, it doesn't matter if they're the same or not. I will interpretively want to make sure ultimately that I understand that they're exactly alike. But physically, I just want to know that I'm comfortable and dependable here. Trustworthy pencil, just as a reminder. Cut myself, because whereas if I were playing this all in the left hand, I'd play 4th finger on A flat. Since I'm making a hand division here, and I want my thumb to start on the D in the right hand, then I have to have a 3-note group after A flat in the left hand. That means I have to do the counterintuitive fingering, and that's why I need to write it down. Again, it doesn't take major effort to write the same lines or the same notation several times. All right. Trio 2. The violin, first violin and the cello, we're playing 16th notes. Stesso tempo. So if we are really going 1, 2, 1, 2, we'll decide later on if that in fact is the case. But for now, it gives me some guide as to what I'm going to be providing in support. And just, it's kind of interesting to me that Schumann writes, now he changes the key signature in this 2-4, and he writes 4 flats. So you think, okay, A flat major or F minor. Of course, the first thing he offers you is a C flat, which is an A flat minor. So you wonder, well, why did he write a 4 flat key signature if he's going into A flat, which A flat minor, which would be 7 flats? But I'm thinking ahead. We'll see if he is in A flat minor. So go figure. Perhaps he just. I'm not even going to venture to guess. I'm just going to be amused by the fact that I recognize that, as so often happens, the visual way in which the score interacts with you is not necessarily the oral way or the mindful way in which you interact with it. So you have to be careful to make sure that however you do interact with the score, its seeming complexity can be reduced to the maximum simplicity, so you don't get overwhelmed by the fact that it might be notated in a funny fashion. Those of you who play Debussy, for example, will note that Debussy writes lots of enharmonic equivalents, many double flats and sharps, many ways of writing out sonorities that are much more easily understandable if they were written more differently. So you just have to be prepared to say either, I understand why he chose the notational system he did, or to write in a translation that enables you to interact with the score more quickly, and for you more comfortably, more simply. So here it's just amusement on my part. Okay, doesn't look problematical. Just now we change. Now we have 4 sharps. That's E major key signature. It just so happens it's nice to be playing an E major chord with an E major key signature. Now it's the 2 inner voices, the 2 inner string players, the second violin and the viola, who are playing the 16th notes. And I'm still happily supporting them. Okay, and now it's my turn and the first violin. Unluckily for me, I don't get things nicely under my hand. I have to move the extra octave for the thumb note. So the last thing I would want to do would be to reach for the octaves and stiffen up my hand. I'll move every one. In fact, I can think of it 2 ways. Again, I can think of the grouping in the gesture going to the thumb and finishing, and then starting again. Or I can think of the thumb as initiating the gesture. In either event, whichever way I think of it, this relationship between the thumb and the fourth cannot be all about stretching. My body immediately tells me, approach the key for the thumb. The thumb is short and it's playing a black note. It needs to be in the keys. You have to come out on the 4th finger. If you reach, you're creating a situation in which the natural lengths of the fingers and the difference in the distance from the keyboard is not being taken advantage of. I always want to take advantage of it. Okay, so it proves not to be very problematic. Again, repeated. Just like in repeated solid chords, same kind of principle. I move with my left hand. I move along the repeated chord. Okay, so far so good. Okay, now I get to busily run around the way my string partners have. Okay, first thing, I mentioned this before. I don't want any surprises in the left hand. So instead of practicing the right hand, I'll practice the left hand. That's our famous A flat minor chord. Okay, so what I notice right away is the A flat minor chord in the second inversion is very comfortable. It's got the thumb on a white note, 2 black notes with the long fingers that are close to one another in length, 2 and 4. The spacing is reasonable, so those are really nice chords. E flat, weird position, not so nice. You know, if I had my druthers, actually, there's nothing that really makes that particular chord comfortable, because you've got the outer notes as black notes and the inner note as a white note. So 1, 3, 5 means your long finger is protruding down below the short 1 and 5. That feels funny. So does 1, 2, and 4. In this case, so does 1, 2, and 3 for that matter, for a similar reason. It's a big enough skip that I'm certainly not going to want to go up to 5th finger. So my choice is go to 4 or go to 3. For this, I don't like to think of a choice, because 4, 2, 1 is so comfortable that it doesn't even have to bargain with any of the other fingers for ascendancy. Okay, so what's tending to happen is that I'm playing 4th finger, so I'm not going to doubt it, I'm just going to use it. Meanwhile, back here, so Schumann is using repetitive patterns. Worth noting, again, is that the score can often mislead. It's an ascending second followed by several descending seconds. So if you re-look or look at it differently, you discover that the 2nd through 5th notes are a descending 4-note scale. So that's an easy 4, 3, 2, 1 call in this case. And then 3 notes left, so I go 3, 2, 1. I could do something fancier, but it wouldn't advantage me at all. And especially because if my bottom note is the thumb, then I have all the room I want to go back up to the top. Now, if I repeat the same fingering in the 2nd sequential iteration, then I'd have to toss my hand to the 3rd one, which may not be a bad thing. In other words, my choice is between keeping this standard fingering, a 4-note group, then a 3-note group, 4-note group, and then doing it again. The alternative would be to extend this fingering by going 4, 3, 2, 1 and starting the next group without having to jump. But I think the consistency for me is going to win out. In other words, I want to feel the musical values and units under my hand in the same way. And because it executionally is pretty simple, that's what I'm going to stick with. Whoops. This is one of those things where the left hand is an innocuous looking little boomchick bass. The right hand has all the busyness, but it's the left hand that needs your attention because it's jumping around. Now, I can do this by feel, but if I need to be sure, especially that big one, so that's not going to be a biggie. Okay, he adds a little bit of intrigue. Schumann has bothered to add the 3rd underneath the top note in the right hand. Normally what I would do is consider, could my left hand take it, just to keep it simple? But he doesn't make that possible because the right hand is too far away from the left hand. So I simply have to find a solution for playing these passages with the 3rd added. For me, the insertion of some of those fingers into the white notes between black notes is the most difficult aspect of that. And the tilt of the hand in odd ways. Right now all I'm doing is 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 1. 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 1, 3, 4, 3, 2. And I rather suspect that will work. And when I refine it, the little things that will make the difference are little tilts in the hand so that I can optimize the way my hand feels when I have to do the twisty things that are necessary for me to play something like a E flat G in the right hand. That, because of my fat 3rd finger, requires me to be slightly sideways. I have to favor the thumb just a little bit, and that's got to be part of my conscious behavior. Okay, now a chromatic in interference of the one hand and the other, so you have to decide what's on top. I think this one is a no-brainer. Your right hand has to play between these two B flats, so it's elevated on the black notes. Okay, that's fine. Okay, second finger in the right hand to start this next passage. I could use third, but there wouldn't be any reason for it. Let's see if that works. Yes, it will. Repeat of the same kind of thing, only in this case the hands aren't interfering with one another. Now, I'm discovering this is not going to be a problem for me, but it is busy and it's a perpetual motion for several pages of score. So this is one of those kinds of passages that I'll have to notate in my head and come back to, so it reaches the point where I can play it in a completely unruffled fashion, because it will destroy the sense of ease if I'm struggling while my partners are having a wonderful light scherzo-y quality. I need to provide just as much scherzo and just as much humor. So if I'm self-conscious about the pianism involved, that will reduce my ability to provide a musical impact that helps to further the affect that this piece demands here. So I want to be really happy with it, ultimately. Not necessarily today, but ultimately. So, okay, so here's one of those cases where if I play the same fingering, I can. Involves the thumb getting to the D sharp. It's ever so slightly weird, but it's not terrible. I could go instead to turn over on 2 and have it under my hand. So. Think right now, because it feels better to go to 2 instead of to the standard 3 for that black note, that's what I'll do. Yeah. Same principle here. I have another black note, the C sharp, that works. So the default is 3, 4, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. But when I toss to a black note, I'm going to toss to a second finger. Okay, that will work. What's happening in the other hand? So, got the rise of a tenth. The last thing I want is to emphasize the tenth. I want my hand to be very compact, so I can play this B minor second inversion, broken chord. So in essence, I'm grouping it as if the bass were independent. That's the way the gesture will work for me. So now I have to find myself paying most of my attention right now to the left hand. That means I have to trust that right hand. I will often, as I'm doing with you, I'm obviously not looking at the keys, because I want to learn to trust that if I'm doing something else, my right hand will behave. I like to call this the difference between the standard accompaniment and solo. In other words, there's often a lead voice, often a melody, plus an accompaniment. But psychologically or mentally speaking, it's often that a certain part that seems subordinate, like an accompaniment, like a boom chick part, is actually where I need my primary concentration. And that's the case right here, that I need my primary concentration, my point of attention, or my choreography of attention, as I call it, to be devoted to letting me know where I go in the left hand. I may need to even do it visually. I may need to be looking at the keys, as is possible here. And at the very least, I need to be hyper-conscious of how my left hand moves around. So, here it's absolutely huge. 2 octaves, 2 plus a third. Second finger in the right, but I also needed to remind myself second finger in the left, because if I don't have a 2, 4, 5, which I like, then I can't comfortably get to the thumb. Someone else who couldn't reach it would again use the pedal, but in my case it really is a big advantage to me to remember to use the second finger. Especially the accent of D. So, what works for the chromatic is the 4th finger to start, because I have room for 4 notes. So that's what I'm going to do. Second finger, and again I haven't reminded myself in the left to go to 2. 2. Incidentally, when I yell at myself like that, that's what I often suggest, that I verbalize and that my students verbalize the precise instruction that will get them the next thing. That's why in the middle of the mental breath, you tell yourself something specific about what your next action is going to be. So by telling myself 2, if I'm not doing it automatically yet, it just makes me hyper-conscious. I need the second finger there. So 2, left hand. All right. Okay, again, we have one of these slightly difficult to read things. We have a G flat minor chord, G flat minor, spelled G, B double flat, D flat. Okay, not everybody can read B double flat comfortably and easily. My ear could tell me that it's that chord called something or other, but my eyes tell me, ooh, does that ever look complicated? So just as a reminder, I write the word A beside the B double flat. I may never even look at it, but just the fact that I thought about it is really significant. Again, we have the same kinds of chords. This, alas, is not nearly as comfortable as this D flat minor chord. Because of the twisting, 2 black notes on the top and a white note on the bottom. If I were optimizing it just for that chord, I'd play 5, 3, and 1. But because I'm coming from such a distance, I might want to split the difference. You know, I'm having second and third thoughts about it. I think I might actually use 4th, 5th finger, even though I normally don't like to leap big leaps from 5 to 5, because it's so much better as a feeling than 4 or 3 is, that it makes me realize that so long as I turn so that my arm puts my left hand in the on the right angle, I'm going to be able to nail that chord. So I'm going to put in a 5 because it optimizes the sensation, and that wins out over playing 4 or 3 that would be closer to the 5th. In some cases, 3 or 4 would win out. In this case, the optimization just of the chord feel turns out to take precedence. Oops. Again, we have a B flat, B double flat, which happens to be a white note. So I have to remind myself, don't go for fancy fingering, it's just 3rd finger. So once I know that, it's right there under my hand. So still going to stick with 3-2-1 on the last three notes. Okay, really important thing, when suddenly the left hand starts, instead of playing straight eighth notes, it starts to play a dotted figure, it's really important to let go of the bass note early to optimize the mechanics of playing the quick repeated chord. If you wait till late, you'll get there late, and even if you get there on time, there will be a tendency to stiffen up and to not have an optimal and simple walking gesture for the repeated chords. So, doubling up thirds again. Is all black notes, all of the black notes are involved. So my fingering needs to be able to accommodate 4, 3, and 2 on the 3 black notes. So I'm going to shake between 1 and 3 in the right hand. I'm going to have to reverse, change direction, and then turn to 3 where I might, oops, excuse me, I turn to 4 where I might otherwise turn to 3 because it sets up that group with the 4th finger. All right. Sound familiar? Okay. I'm convinced enough that this is the same. So a very cursory review. Coda is different, otherwise it wouldn't be a coda. I'm not saying there are different notes in it. Interesting. A reminder that I'm going to put 4th finger on D flat. So it also requires me to, even though I have a small tritone here, where I could put 3, 2, 1 and it would work out just fine, I'm going to choose to start on 1. It's a sforzando. Gives me a little more impact, and I don't have to feel any sense of extension at the same time. All right. That's it. I have to trust that my ear is saying, is that right? And then my eyes say, it is. So I'll get my ear on board shortly. left hand that's going to need a little investigation for fingering. He's got a held E flat, but only for the last the last eighth note, one measure, and then the first two eighth notes, the next measure. So start at the top. I have to get to A flat, so logically, just that second finger up here, 3-note. Here's where it gets really interesting. A B flat, B natural. Seems to work. You simply put in 5-4 and then play to the top of the hand, 3-2-1, let go, and then do three times in a row. It's odd, but lots of stuff is odd. And since it's non-legato, it's actually reasonable to feel those 3 placements on the keyboard. All right. Tremolo in the right hand and play a repeated note. But that's the one bit of awareness you need to pull it off. And one of these hybrid scales that's not chromatic and it's not diatonic, it's diatonic with chromatic overtones. Doesn't look too hard. By Schumann, which is, again, a lot of composers don't do that. They don't either show interpretively how they want to isolate certain notes and provide a sense of grouping or motive or belonging. And also they're not, in this case, as helpful as Schumann is physically, because by following his interpretive grouping, he also gives you, in effect, a physical solution. So, this and this and this and this. So the only slight awkwardness is in how much you move in and out to give a sense of ease to each execution, and also to sting the beat a little. To here and here and here and here and here and here. From here and here. Now, I got much more accurate the moment I looked at the keys. Go figure. I'll probably do that, at least initially.